Health and Ways and Means meeting. Please join me for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, do we have anyone here for public participation? No? Okay, great. All right, then we'll move on to the next thing, which is our annual reorganization, where we elect our chair and vice chair for the coming year. Do we have any nominations for chair?
I will do one. I'll nominate John K. Eiler for chair.
Second.
Second. Any other? Okay. Ed, are you online there?
I am.
Ah, excellent. I was guessing you were EP, but I've guessed wrong many times before. All right, so all right, so we'll do a roll call then.
You can expect me for about a half hour, and I'll be boarding a plane, so I'll listen in, but I'll be out of you.
All right, we'll try to do the exciting things quickly then. All right, Cheyenne? Yes.
Present.
Was Chris Campbell not here? We're voting. Was that a yes or?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh, sorry,
All right.
yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to misinterpret you there.
I misinterpreted you. I'm sorry.
No
I
worries.
mistake.
Doug?
Yes.
Chris Delaney?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Ed?
I don't know what I'm voting on, so I'm gonna have to abstain.
Oh, we're voting for the chair, and Steve has nominated myself.
How long is that?
They're basically accountants.
Okay, thank you. We'll put you down as a yes. All right, Roger?
Okay, yeah.
Give Roger a strong maybe. And David?
Yes.
Very good. All right, that's, who am I missing here? Oh, and myself, yes. That's 11-0-0. All right, very good. Now, do we have nominations for vice chair?
I move to nominate Doug for vice chairman.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. All right, we're voting on vice chair. All right.
I'm glad we cleared that up.
We'll go reverse alphabetical so I don't put you on hot spot every time.
Yes.
David. Roger.
Yes.
Ed.
Check.
Ed, for vice chair, Ed?
He's checking his baggage.
Must
All
be
right,
board
we
notice.
lost Ed. We'll see if he comes back.
Good internet.
Rob.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Cheyenne.
Yes.
And Chris Campbell here. We are voting on Vice Chair Doug Davison. How would you like to vote?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, that,
Oh, Ed's back.
oh, Ed, you're back. Would you like to vote for yes or no on Doug Davison for Vice Chair?
That was a yes for the third time.
Okay, very good. Sorry, I'll try to pay better attention. And the chair votes yes. That's 12-0-0. Motion passes. All right. Just make a note that Chris came here. Very good. All right, next on the agenda is the end of year transfers. Does Town Hall 1 have a report on that?
We do. We met with the Paul and John. Did everyone receive the transfer sheets today? So you'll see, basically there's a surplus on one side. These are just transfers, end of the year's transfers to balance out each department and the spending in each department. So you have a deficit side and a surplus side with the balances that are swapped over. So, and then on the bottom there are notes as far as what the detail is, and Frank and I kind of went through each one. you know, the main ones that jump out are ones that we've talked about, or at least the first one, is the fire salaries. We partially took care of that during the May town meeting with the overtime. This is the remaining transfer that needed to be done, which we all hope is something that we won't be seeing again next year. But this kind of closes out that side for the fiscal year. The other one is kind of a swap between the debt and principal line item, $182,000. Again, just anticipated that there would be a principal and interest payment when they were figuring the schedules from a year ago, and the ban continued, so there was more interest that was needed, so they swapped over the principal line item to cover it. The other ones are really, I guess, minor in nature. I'll leave it up to the board if there's any questions on specific ones. But on, you know, $600,000 on a $140 million budget, I think the administration does a tremendous job.
And did you have a vote on that?
And we voted 2-0 in favor.
Questions? Did you have a hand up, Roger?
I have a question, but not directly on this.
On something else, okay. You're keeping us in suspense.
Sticking to the agenda.
Very good. Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just for clarity, and I asked them about this again, this requires a vote of the selectmen and of Ways and Means legally to do it, and that's it. And this closes out the books for all deficits in that fiscal year budget. So that's why we need to do this.
Right, and this had to happen before July 15th is my understanding.
Yeah, right.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you will, I want to make sure I take the opportunity to publicly thank the legislature for making this change about 6 or 7 years ago when they did the Municipal Modernization Act, because this was the bane of the existence of the town accountant back in the day, because we would have had to project this for a May transfer. So in their wisdom, they allowed for this to be done up till the July 15th. Well, actually the 17th this year, because the 15th is on a Saturday. So they allowed for, in a town, the Finance Committee, Ways and Means in our town, and the executive branch, the Select Board, to approve these transfers to happen, so we can close the books and not get in hot water with our auditors and have any deficits. In a city, this would just be done by the mayor, with the approval of council. In a town, it's gotta go to a couple different places.
And the select board's voting on Monday on this,
Monday.
is my understanding, so, okay.
Just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
is there like a percentage limit of the budget that's allowed, or it's up to, you can transfer as
There
much as
is
you want?
not anymore.
Okay.
Back when you used to have to do it at town meeting, there was 10% of a department budget or 1% of the total budget. And now the only difference now is we wouldn't be able to transfer from the school department's budget without the school committee's approval. Or if we had a municipal light department, we wouldn't be able to transfer out of their department without that committee's approval either. But other than that, no limit.
Thank you.
Cheyenne?
Just a question. I'm not really familiar with what you mean by percentage limit.
So, just as if there's a limit based on the percentage of the budget, so theoretically, if they wanted to, they could move, 140 million at the end of the year and kind of defeat the purpose of what we had budgeted during the beginning of the fiscal year, but with it being 600,000 on 140 million, there's just some minor cleanup that needs to be done because some forecasting that they did earlier in the year was a little bit off, like the fire salaries, for example.
Okay. All right.
I
No,
don't remember
I'm just
exactly
not
what it
familiar.
was, but I think years ago, it was 5 or 10% of maybe a department's budget was sort of the max that you could move around. That was quite a while ago, so we lifted that.
And this is a standard thing, it happens at the end of each fiscal year. Doug?
This gets reported at September town meeting, just as a, keep everybody in the loop. Do I remember that? Is that under, or no, not really?
Additionally, it
Okay.
has not.
We're done.
Okay. Not as a vote, but just as a close out the, I couldn't remember. All right.
Roger?
And just, I assume that with these transfers, when we see on next year's budget, when we see last year's numbers, it will include these transferred amounts?
It will include it in the actual. So we won't change, we won't decrease, we wouldn't publish in next year's, in the 2025 budget book. We wouldn't budget 23's budgeted numbers, but we have the actuals. So yes, it will be in there, but it will be in the actuals.
So it doesn't
Next year, we're
change.
comparing 25 and 24, so 23 sort of drops back a year, sort of out of the financial calculations that we work with on the basic budget.
Oh,
sheet.
okay, right. So the budget that we already considered would have shown these numbers, but these numbers didn't exist then. Okay, never mind.
Right. But they will be in the actuals.
Okay.
I just had two questions. One, I'm just curious how the bands work. Is it correct that with bands you're only paying interest and no principal?
Correct.
Okay. And I have to ask on the fire, I know we were expecting overtime to be an issue with fire. Was it even more of an issue than we were anticipating in the end, or?
No, I think we got it almost right to the number. However, we took care of half of the problem at Maytown meeting with the transfer from the ambulance receipts reserved.
Right.
And we also approved the 24 budget to be what we consider right-sized, and also have the transfer from receipts reserved in the 24 budget. So we're hopeful this is the last time. I don't want to stand in front of town meeting and talk about it anymore, so we're going to do our best.
Understandable. Okay. Further discussion on that? Steve?
Just really minor. What is DAC short for?
Disability Access Committee.
Oh, thank you. Motion to approve?
Second.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so this is a motion to approve a total transfer of $601,891.64 as specified in the document that was sent around. All right, so, there we go. David,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Ed. Excellent, thank you. Rob,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Chris Delaney,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Chris Campbell,
Yes.
Cheyenne.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 12-0-0.
Frank, could you give me a copy?
Yes, Roger.
So as you're wrapping up the books for the year, obviously you've gotten to a certain point where you can identify these things. How much do you expect to turn back from various budgets?
So we have all the payrolls.
Hey, Ed, you might want to mute.
You muted? Doug? Doug?
Your traffic
I
control?
can certainly try.
Ed, we're hearing the airport. If you can mute, that'd be great.
Gotcha. My bad.
Thank you.
Lift off.
Okay, sorry.
What were we talking?
Sorry, turning back from various
Oh,
budgets.
yeah, sorry. So we have calculated all the last warrant and the last payroll warrant. However, there's still what's called encumbrances. So these are bills that come in or services that were performed, we just haven't been billed for yet. And that has another week and a half-ish left before we nail down that number, so we don't have a good number yet.
Okay, thank you.
Coming up still.
Nice try. I already tried that.
Free cash will be into September.
I'm looking forward to a big free cash number.
All right. Next on our agenda is the Fox Hill Building Committee update. You had something on that, Roger?
Yeah, I imagine a bunch of people have been keeping pretty close track of this, so I'll try not to spend too much time on it. So for Ways and Means, I'm on the Fox Hill School Building Committee, and I just wanted to give a little update about what's happened and what's next. So in the last year, they've done a whole lot. They've hired an owner's project manager, they've hired the architects, they've established through subcontractors the existing conditions of all the buildings, both Fox Hill and Pine Glen. They've surveyed both sites and identified the existing conditions, wetland, traffic problems. They've established working groups under the building committee for the executive working group, communications working group, sustainability working group, and a financial working group. They identified the MSBA required preliminary options for building configurations, of which there are 8, some combinations of repair and new construction. And they have documented them in terms of the scope. They developed the education plan, which describes in detail every activity that happens in the schools at the elementary level and special ed that happens in both schools, as the basis for developing the space requirements that are needed for the new schools. They also developed, in addition to the MSBA, 8 required MSBA configurations, they developed an estimate for a brand-new Pine Glen school that would be potentially paired with the new Fox Hill School. I won't get into the configurations. There's been a lot of debate about what the preferred thing was. The designers have also done a trial fit for where schools would be placed on the 2 properties in each of the configurations that's been visible. They produced cost estimates for each of the 9 options that both say what the estimated cost of the building is, because once you have the space requirements, you can do some estimation about what the cost should be. So the rough estimates for costs and MSBA reimbursements. There's a bunch of other costs that go in there for contingencies for construction, design, and fitting out the buildings. Back of the envelopes estimates are based on a lot of assumptions, which are going to get revisited as the process moves forward. From those costs, various people have come up with the total cost of the project and the part that Burlington is going to have to pay for compared to the part that the MSBA is likely to reimburse for each of the configurations. And those numbers have shaken down to where they're sort of rough estimates for what an annual medium residential tax increase would be. There's a lot of caution required here because since all the numbers and everything are likely to change as things get refined. So it's hard, it's easy to sort of throw these numbers out, but they don't get too attached to any individual number. So to date, they have created what's called the Preliminary Design Program, which is it's an 1,800-page document that describes everything they've learned from the sites and the education plan and the space requirements, sort of everything that's required to completely describe the scope of, and detail, not details, but the scope of all of each of the projects and alternatives. That is going to be voted on by the school committee to be submitted to the MSBA tomorrow night. So it's an impressive document. If you want a lot of reading and figure out what's going on, that's the place to start. There's a pretty thoroughly documented website that has all the meetings and minutes and the documents and the site evaluations. Sort of everything that's been produced by the designer and the project manager and the committee is on that website called foxhillbuildingproject.com. All throughout the process, they've held community meetings of both the school building committee and the subcommittees to communicate to whoever's interested the progress schedule and the structure to move the process forward. The process is very structured by the MSBA requirements. When you're in the process, when you're in their program, there's a lot of steps that you go through because they say you have to, and they've got a fairly deliberative process to do that. Along the way, there have been public comment periods at every meeting, and there's been a lot of listening and advice, being advised for input by parents, residents, and all interested parties. So we're at the point where, what's next? So they're going to submit the preliminary design program probably this week after the vote. And for the whole SBC as a whole, the next thing is to narrow the options down from the 8 from 9. By evaluating the options against the criteria matrix. There are 50 criteria that have to do with, does it meet the education plan needs? And it's pretty clear that some configurations just don't because they're too small or they're too old or something. Evaluate to rate the impact on the neighborhood and the community. Evaluate its sustainability over time. There's a part of the sustainability subgroup's work task is to figure out where what are the options are for sustainability to get to net zero. There are a couple of standards for net zero use, and that subcommittee will be looking at that. Other things that get evaluated is equity across schools. There's a big concern about, somebody gets a new school and everybody else is left with the school they had before. And then evaluating and rating site benefits and limitations and operational costs. And as I said, there's like 50 sets of criteria to evaluate, cost and everything for all of these plans. And the process, according to the MSBA process, we have to narrow it down to one plan by roughly November. So there's going to be a lot of discussion between now and then about rating and how the trade-offs get made. You're probably aware there's a fair amount of interest in particular plans or not plans, not specific plans. And so that process is going to move forward probably, I think a few people are going to take some vacation, but in August. Specifically about the costs, there's the financial group is going to work on modeling the costs of the building in concert with the town's financial team and Ways and Means and Capital Budget Committees. There are a lot of people who are interested in the cost and the way the cost is turned into annual costs to residents. There's a lot of things that have to be figured out about borrowing when and sequencing. They're going to be looking at models that include borrowing rates, the impact on residential and commercial taxpayers, the timing of capital projects, and how much can be done concurrently, both in terms of mind share and public participation and feedback. And the financial working group also has to take into account coming up with a plan to sell, if you will, to market the particular plan and costs to the residents and the parents and town meeting members who are ultimately going to have to vote on the authorizing the expenditure. So I think it was said last night during the interview that there sort of is no alternative to coming up to a plan that everybody can buy into to a sufficient degree. If town meeting for some reason decides that they don't like the plan in bulk, and they don't vote for the funding, then the project goes poof. You have to completely start from scratch. I guess the final detail is just in terms of getting all of the funding in place and a plan put in place, the schedule, of which is also on the website, sort of outlines the process to getting a vote on the authorization for funding by next fall, September's town meeting. So 14 months. So that's sort of the high-level piece of where it is and what we have to do next. There's a lot of people are going to be involved. A lot of people are already involved, and there's a lot of not awkward, but a lot of trade-offs that have to get made. So that's what I got. Questions, comments, accusations?
Hints and allegations.
Yeah, well, first off, both Ed and Roger are on the school building committee for this, so thanks for all your time on this. I know it's a big project. I have asked Town Hall 1 to get going on greasing the skids with thinking about, how does our overall debt plan work. We have a lot of things coming up. There's obviously the Fox Hill project, and potentially a separate Pine Glen project, depending on how it goes. We've all talked about the police station, and we know that the high school project of some sort is coming down the pike. Town meeting, allocated money for that just at the May meeting. So that the building committee for that has either been formed or will be formed shortly. Of course, we don't know the numbers for any of these things yet. We have estimates on various things, but the goal would be to have a procedure in place where once we do start getting numbers, we can quickly turn that into what does it mean rather than starting a process then and trying to sort it out. So you can talk about things ahead of time, like how might we go about a debt override if there is one, and when might that happen among those various projects? What sort of interest rates are we assuming? How would we bond various things? So those are all kinds of things. And David pointed out that absolutely would be very interested in getting other folks' input. And oftentimes our subcommittees are meetings that have even fewer attendees from the public than our Ways and Means meeting. But I think the intention here, in particular with Town Hall 1, would be that more people would be involved in that because, for instance, I know the school building folks have a lot of input with that. Ed, are you raising a hand or?
No.
Okay, sorry. All right.
That was a physical hand, not an electronic hand.
People are tricking me with their hands tonight. All right. Any other comments or questions on the school building report here?
And just to add to that, Frank and I have already started laying the groundwork with the administration to at least start that process, and we're going to start in August. We've
Okay.
tentatively scheduled a time already, so
Excellent.
we'll keep the
Great.
committee informed.
All right. Chris.
So I have a couple of questions. So one of them was, so there are the 8 options, and I don't think this was clear. Are all the 8 options based on MSBA specs when looking at the 8 options? And if they are, with the feasibility study, could and should we be considering a non-MSBA school option for both Pine Glen and or Fox Hill? The reason I raise this is when this process started, the guess was the school was going to be $40 million, as was reported, and now we're at $110 to $150 million, which is going to be a lot for taxpayers, a lot for town meeting members to weigh on when we started down this process. And the question that I would raise is there an option with what's left in the feasibility study to still look at other non-MSBA options?
I guess I would, at some level, so the MSBA scope is very specifically Fox Hill and an alternative that combines it with Pine Glen. So if there's another school for Fox Hill that is outside of the MSBA's purview, which means the current committee does really not get that in their scope. I mean, my own estimation is that if we get to the point where we think there needs to be another Fox Hill replacement, that should have its own committee funding development from scratch. But that's my personal opinion. The committee has not really weighed into that.
Okay.
The original 8 options are driven by the MSBA's combination of factors of repair and new, and the permutations.
Okay. So then my other question would be, if, this is a big if, but town meeting does not go forward with any of the 8 options, we're not going to lose all of that work in the feasibility study and these plans potentially through the process. We would still own those because and correct me if I'm wrong, but own those because we paid for the feasibility study through town meeting and we paid for that work. So if we decided to then go a different way, we wouldn't then just lose everything and have to potentially start from scratch.
Right. I believe we own the work product that they've done. This 1,800-page document.
Yep.
The education plan is eminently reusable. It already covers what was essentially Pine Glen.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a bunch of reusability there. We won't lose it. I kind of think it's not an option to come up with something that town meeting will not approve.
I would completely agree.
If we get close, we've got to work harder.
I would agree.
So-
And I think my last thing is I'd just be cautious about using the word equity when we're really talking about equitable. Because when we're talking about equitable, that's fair across schools. Equity, we can't put into constraints when we're talking about different programming, different buildings. There's a lot that goes into what is equity versus what is equitable. And I think that's what a lot of what I've been hearing on this is that, we need to have equity across schools. We're never going to have equity across 4 different community-based schools that have different programs, different school cultures, different sizes, different ages. If they're looking for equitability, that's different. And that's just something I personally would caution when using the words of equity and equitable. So.
Yeah, I think I meant that. I misused the word. I'm sorry.
Number? Oh, sorry. One last. Sorry. The other last point I just wanted to bring up is there are capital projects that are going to be involved with this. Specifically, one of the things that mentions a 2029, 2030 capital project to put sidewalks on Donald Road, which then would also be taken from property. And so there will be scopes to this project that are not just going to be defined in this. And I think a lot of the people that live on Donald Road and neighbors would be very interested to know what the scope and price of those are going to be, because if those projects don't then get put forward, it may be very difficult for those neighbors to even consider some of the options being considered.
I mean, just one thing that I didn't mention, which I think is that with so many things, I mean, the numbers that we come up with for funding of the Fox Hill project, whatever it is, are always going to be layered on top of our annual operating system increases, operating, and our existing capital plan. And, any capital requests that came out of the school's athletic field study. So these are layered in on top of each other. And that's part of what makes the overall long-term planning more difficult, because the residents and the commercial players, who pay quite a bit, are going to see, the sum of all of those, not an individual number.
Frank?
If I may, just to catch on that, Roger, that's exactly the kind of thing that we will make a bigger effort to look at. We're already looking at what this has to layer on top of, and that's what we'll start talking about in as much detail as we can in August. And we are also concerned about the commercial costs. That plays into this in a big way. And that also plays into whether or not, when and if you have to have debt exclusion and that sort of thing. So we'll start looking at that much more carefully with John and Gary, and maybe some others he'll bring in August. That's about the soonest we can get to it. Okay? So you're right.
Doug?
Yeah, I had a couple of things. That's mostly one of the, we also have to keep the commercial rates in mind, because we could ruin a good thing here. The other thing, the sustainability component, net zero would be cool and exciting. It's not required by MSBA, right? So they do require a pretty sustainable building, I believe, yes, but not to the net zero. So will there be a cost assigned to? That's kind of a, hey, if you want to do it, it's over and above. That adds to the top of the bill.
Yeah, I think, so yes, we haven't gotten into much detail in the Sustainability Working Group. One big cost which is not enumerated there, which has shown up in previous conversation, is the use of geothermal.
Yeah, I saw that.
For the cost of that is an incremental cost over what's been requested. There's a trade-off between long-term operational costs, which can be lower, versus an upfront cost. The building codes are already tighter than they have been, but net zero is not actually, the rating system doesn't get you to zero unless you do everything. But they help you, the points that you get for various improvements push you down. You get points for a lot of different kinds of improvements. And some of them are not even, some of them are as simple as documenting how the heating system works, so you can educate people about heat loss, right? You get points for just communicating this stuff. Anyway, so it's not an absolute zero. You don't get to zero. And for everything of which there's an incremental cost, that'll get looked at, especially if we get to the point in the design cycle where we're up against the number, and they do what's called value engineering, which basically says you go back and you downgrade some things to save money.
Yeah, I think it was the geothermal number that I saw and was concerned about. That's kind of a bigger number.
It's not a small number.
Cheyenne?
I have a few questions here. First, I guess I'll start with the easiest one. Equity versus equitable. I guess Chris was, discussing, what we're trying to do in terms of different schools, different cultures, different mindsets. But to my understanding, we have a few different elementary schools going on here. We have Fox Hill, Pine Glen, which I'm still not sure if that's going to be like a merged kind of deal, or if that's going to be one school taking on the role of both. I'm still pretty unclear on that.
I'm not going to answer that because that is one of the points of contention and is one of the things that's going to fall out of the evaluation over the next, several months.
Okay, so that answers that question. Let's leave that alone. But as far as, since we have, several different elementary schools, going on, equitable, I guess, to me means that all of the schools are teaching more or less the same thing, right?
So I should probably deflect this because it's not really a financial thing back to the school building committee. But if you read the education plan, the educational plan applies for all elementary schools in Burlington, except some special programs. That's the level of teacher engagement and student engagement that I think the district is looking across the board. There are individual differences, but I don't think there's any intent or necessity to be different. In fact, I'm sure the goal is to be the same.
Or at least more or less the same,
Right.
yeah, okay. Now, if we were to build this new school, this Fox Hill / Pine Glen / Merge school, what is our expected tax increase?
Well, the numbers that have been derived from the current estimates are, I think I wrote them down here, probably other people have them too. For the Fox Hill alone, about $260 per residential for a median taxed home.
Per year?
Per year, oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
And that's the bottom. They go up from there to twice that or thereabouts.
Depending on income and so on, yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, I guess that's all my questions for the moment. I'll hold off on the Fox Hill Pine Glen stuff for a couple of months.
Everybody who's interested should, let's say, get on the mailing list for the school building committee, but at the moment they don't have one. But attend the meetings and read the minutes and,
Well, I don't have any kids, so, I'm kind of out of the loop.
well, you'll have to decide for yourself how much you want to know and when.
Yeah, I'll put out a small advertisement that, as Roger mentioned, there is a Fox Hill Building website that has a lot of information on it. Definitely look at that, and definitely now is the time to go to the meetings because it's when you'll have the most influence.
Right.
As was pointed out, roughly around November, that set of 8 or 9 choices, depending how you look at it, are going to be narrowed down to 1. And at that point, you'll have a lot less impact on the big picture. You'll be working around the edges. So now is the time to get involved if you want to have a say in this matter.
Okay.
All right, great. Okay. I'm sorry, Megan.
Thanks. I have a question about special education specifically. How has the committee considered special education programming? I know that potentially moving part of the DSC over to Fox Hill, around the configuration. However, if we're moving the two schools together, merging the two schools together to whatever configuration we'd like to call it, and losing Pine Glen as an educational facility, have we considered how we can use that space maintaining 4 elementary schools for special education programming that we're currently sending children out of district for? Like what the cost savings would be for the district if we kept that school, maintained it, or renovated it, or replaced it, whatever those permutations may be, and created more programming in district that we're currently sending children outside of district for, and they're losing that ability to maintain or create more social capital within there.
All right. This is a question for Eric Conti, but I think if I can channel him,
Okay.
I think he would say that one of the big benefits of special education in Burlington is that it is in the schools, working with neurotypical, I'm going to screw this up because you know all this better than I do.
Sorry.
And that creating a separate school for special education is actually not part of the plan. The plan is to integrate the kids as much as possible into education. So there have been, and people will continue to suggest ideas for, if Pine Glen did free up in some way, people would have no end of other uses for it. But I think educationally, keeping special ed kids in the typical classrooms and environment is the goal.
Absolutely.
And so,
And if I may, I guess I may have miscommunicated. My idea or my thought was that if we keep Pine Glen as an elementary school and we keep Fox Hill as an elementary school, 4 separate buildings, and we integrate more programming that we're currently sending with children out of district for, like language-based learning, for students with dyslexia or other learning disabilities that we're currently sending kids to schools out of district and spending a lot of money on transportation and educational costs, which are appropriate because we don't have these programs inside of our schools. How could we bring those programs into our schools and make a separate building and really be more financially appropriate for the town?
right. Again, if I try to channel Eric, I think he would say that would be great because he has been pushing over the past probably 10 or 15 years to pull more out-of-placement kids, create programs that satisfy the education requirements of special ed kids at an economically viable scale and scope. And I think he would continue to push to do that. And if it takes facilities that we have, then they would be needed to create the program.
Yeah, I think that that's important, and I feel like that's something that I haven't heard a lot about, and I think it's something that we should really be considering and for a long-term project for the town, or long-term goal for the town. Thank you.
Adam,
So I'm picking up on what Ms. Newell.
actually, come on up to a microphone just so everyone can hear you.
So I picked up on what Ms. Newajcik is saying, and a concern of mine, and I've been following this very closely, but a concern of mine as a parent of a child with special needs is that if we leverage ourselves too far with the physical infrastructure is very important. But what happens in the buildings is more important in many instances. So if we put too much into one basket, we're tying on our hands with relationship to how we can expand services in the other basket. So I just think that that is a factor that we need to consider as we look at this moving forward.
Yeah, as Roger pointed out, the whole debate about whether this should be one large school at the Fox Hill site or 2 separate schools at the current Pine Glen and Fox Hill sites is probably the most contentious issue, I would say, and that's a great discussion to have. I'm going to suggest that needs to happen at the school building committee meetings. That's where all the right people are going to be that ultimately are narrowing it down to one choice. Ways and Means will help model what are the impacts of all these various things. But in the end, the decision is as to what's presented to the town is made by the building committee. So definitely encourage folks to go to that. Just so everyone understands the schedule, the current plan is that this would end up at a town meeting vote in September of 2024. Obviously, a lot happens before then, but since it's a bonding issue, 2/3 of town meeting would need to approve that. So that's where all this is headed to eventually. And if a debt override is needed, then or desired for whatever reason, that would require a vote of the town. But if there's no debt override required, it's just town meeting that would approve it.
Just one more comment to Adam's comments. One of the things that is not very clear yet, exactly the details. So the new Fox Hill School, the small one, the 325 one, is actually not big enough for the current set of students that are in Fox Hill. There will be impacts on students and programs in other schools to balance out the student population over time. And those are not clearly understood, at least not by me as being outside of the school system. But it's not that we're just going to, replace a Fox Hill with a new Fox Hill and everything else will stay the same. Not gonna be. So,
Right, there's likely to be a redistricting impact to any of these plans. Okay, Cheyenne?
Just a quick comment. It's not just about the school that is being built, like the physical building itself. I feel like we need to train and teach our teachers and equip them with the tools they need to teach our students the best that they can. Whether they be special needs, whether they be disabilities, whatever they need to do, they need to have all the equipment and all the tools they need to do their job the best that they can. The building is secondary at that point.
Okay, move on to our final topic. That's everything on that, which is our approval of minutes. So there's been one suggested change. Frank mentioned at the subcommittee vote for Article 19 was missing, so we added that in. So it was unanimous, if anyone can remember what that was. So with that amendment, I can look it up if you want to know. Here, I'll look it up. I shouldn't have said that. There, it's right here. Here we go. It's the A&P compensation plan that Town Hall 1 voted unanimously for.
Second.
All right. Thank you.
Nice job, guys.
All right. Let me grab the voting here.
oh, good, we can do it with, it looks like Edward is gone.
Quick.
All right, quick, before he comes back. All right.
Those phones still there.
Oh, he's still here. All right.
I'm sorry, Ed.
All right. I can't believe you said that, Roger.
He's on the
All right.
Roger.
All right.
Luck with your flight.
All right, we'll do a roll call. David,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Ed, I heard yes. Rob? Yes. Thank you, Roger. Megan?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Chris Delaney?
I think I have to abstain from this.
Abstain, okay. Doug?
Yes.
Chris Campbell?
Yes.
Cheyenne?
Present.
You have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Or abstain. All right, and
Now.
chair votes yes. Always a troublemaker. All right, that's 11-0-1. Is there anything else for tonight that we may have missed here? All right, then we are adjourned.
I don't-